All right, good vach and welcome. Shavua Tov. Have a good week. Welcome to Rabbi Misachas Rosh Hashana, Daf Yud Dalid 14. As you know, I'm flying. If you don't know, I'm going to be flying to America in a couple days. Monday night, we're leaving. Hopefully, we'll have the share Tuesday from New York, live from New York. They say on Saturday Night Live. Live from New York City. It won't be New York City, it'll be Long Island, but close enough. All right, so the top of Yudalim and Aleph, the Gemara says V'sricha. We had three teachings of Shmuel on the previous Amud on Yud Gimel. Shmuel said three things. He said the halacha follows Rosh and Shazuri. He said the halacha there's no mixing in regards to Shumos and Maestros except by liquids. And he also said that kitnios are designated when they reach full maturity and not when they take root. So why do you need all teachings? All three teachings. V'sricha, I need all three teachings. If you said the halachas like Shema Shazuri, or by Paul HaMitzri, that you take Shumas and Maestros from 1 year, you don't take Shumas and Maestros. Normally Shumas and Maestros and Kitnios, if you take it from when they took root, or after Lakita, it would end up being spanning two parts of Rosh Hashanah, right before Rosh Hashanah and right after Rosh Hashanah. And that would be a problem because we really want one crop to take Shumas and Maestros off together, not divided into 2 years. If I said Allah Shema Shazuri, that said that it goes after, you do it at one time. I would have said the reason is because he holds that there's bila. Shmuel holds of bila. You mix it together like he is sober garner l'tocho. Shmuel says you mix everything together, and then once it's mixed evenly, then you can take Oshmas and Maestros. Chamashman l'cholein bila. He doesn't hold the bila for everything, only for liquids. V'yashma'ina l'cholein bila. If he just told me it was only bila, only mixture for liquids, how mina karaban spirle. I would say yeah, he doesn't hold like Rosh Shazuri. He says she would say. Therefore, he teaches you that he does hold like Shema Shazuri. How many Hakash the Shmuel? Be a question of Shmuel and Shmuel. If he doesn't hold the Bila, how could he possibly like Shema Shazuri? Shema Shazuri says Sober Gorner Lotocho. You mix everything together, and therefore, even though the Lakita spans right before Rosh Hashanah, right after Rosh Hashanah, it would still be one Shumas and Maestros. It wouldn't be Min Chadash al Yashan, Yashan al Chadash. Every tells you the halacha follows Shem Shazuri, but not because of his reasoning, not because of sober garnel tocho, rather because it goes after when the seed matures, and the seed matures after Rosh Hashanah. It matures after Rosh Hashanah by kitnios, so therefore you take it from the year after Rosh Hashanah. That's part of that year, not the year before. If he just said the third thing, I would say not just kitnios, but also grain or olives also would be after the Gemara Pri, and not when it reaches a shlish of its growth. Tfuan Zaysim, we know the cutoff point is when it reaches a third of its growth. Only what he argues about kitnios, but not other things. Say the other two things. The cholim bila lamli. Why did they tell him teach me? Shmuel have to teach me. There's no bila except for liquids. Because maybe I would have said maybe even liquids there's no bila, there's no mixing. You can mix them together and take off Shmuel's Maisos evenly at one time. It says in the pasuk, it's talking about the Chag of Sukkos, of Sukkot, tabernacles. When you gather in the refuse from your threshing floor and your wine vat. Wheat and grapes or wine, they grow on last year's water, meaning the water before Rosh Hashanah. During the winter, they grow and they get Trumas and Maisos for the past year. L'shana sha'avra. Yatsu Yerako shegdelin al meishana haba Masasrin Lashana Haba. Vegetables are excluded from things like tavua, like the three things: tavua, wheat, and wine, and olive oil. Those three things are excluded. They go after a third of their growth. To exclude Yerakos, vegetables, that they actually continue growing Shana Haba. They are harvested after Rosh Hashanah, and therefore the moisture after Rosh Hashanah still affects them, and it finishes their growth. And since it finishes their growth, therefore it goes after Shas Lakita. Vegetables go after it's picked, and it also is after Rosh Hashanah, after Aleph Tishrei. Rabbi Kiva Omer, a different drush. It's the same idea. He just says it a little differently. Wheat and wine, they grow, or grapes, they grow on. Rov mayim is considered rainfall. Most water that plants get is from the rain. Some plants are irrigated. You actually pour water on them to water them, but most of the water comes from rainwater. Again, to exclude vegetables, their cutoff point is lakita, which usually their harvesting, which usually happens after Rosh Hashanah, because they're different than Tvua, V'Zeisim, and Dagon, Tirosh, V'Yitzar, which are the three Chumas Ma'asos D'Oraisa. You go after shlish of their growth. They only grow on rainwater, but vegetables are irrigated also, so they are different, and they get Chumas and Maestros taken off by Shas Lakita, which is after Rosh Hashanah. My Benai, what's the practical difference between Rabbi Akiva and Yossi Aglili? They basically say the same idea, just Dagan Tirosh V'Yitzar, wheat, wine, and olive oil is differentiated from other vegetables. What's the difference? Amar Rabbi Abau, B'tzolim Hasarisin Upola Mitzri Yikumanai. We're talking about a specific type of onions. These are small onions. Pola Mitzri is an Egyptian bean, a specific type of bean. Yikumanai. The stam B'tzolim Hasarisin Upola Mitzri Shamana Mehen Mayim Shloshim Yom L'fnei Rosh Hashanah Mitzrashim L'Sha'avar or Mutarim B'Shvius. If these two species of food, if you didn't water them, they didn't receive water 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, then the Chumash Ma'asos are calculated based on the previous year before Rosh Hashanah, and they're mutter and shvius. If the upcoming year is shvius, they're not considered payroll shvius. Im lav, but if they did get water within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, asur mishvius masasrin l'shana haba, then they would be included in the next year. So this would be the practical difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he says that it depends on, was it from last year's water or also from this year's water. So if you water them within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, so some of the moisture would remain in the ground, and these small onions and this pola mitzri, this Egyptian bean, would get sustenance from the ground, from the moist ground, and therefore you do it according to Yosef Glili. These two species would have Chumas Ma'asos taken off from the following year, and Shemitah would be noeg with them. According to Rabbi Akiva, that in general, with these, even with these species, they usually are grown. They're usually not grown with irrigation; they're grown with rainwater, and therefore, even if you would provide moisture in the ground within 30 days of Rosh Hashanah, since they're normally not irrigated, so therefore it would always go based on the previous year before Rosh Hashanah, and Shemitah would not apply. The first day of Shvat, this is our Mishnah again, it says according to Beis Shammai, it's Rosh Hashanah al Elon, my time. What's the reason? Where do we know that from? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yishai, Ho v'yatzu rov gishmei shana, v'adayin rov tkufa mibachutz. Since by already Rosh Chodesh Shvat, most of the rainwater from the winter in Eretz Yisrael, it only really rains during the winter. That's what the Gemara is talking about. Shumas Ma'asos was really only applying Eretz Yisrael. There's no rainwater during the summer. It doesn't rain during the summer. Since by Shvat, most of the rainwater has already fallen, and still you have rove of the season yet to come. Gemara asked, "My comment, what does this mean to say?" Haki Kamar, Afal Pisha Rov Tkufa Mechutz. Even though most of the Tkufa here is talking about the winter, which is the winter season, which starts in Teves. So Teves, once you hit Rosh Chodesh Shvat, it's pretty much the beginning of the Tkufa of winter. So most of the winter has not passed yet. Most of the rainwater has passed because the rain starts, or we already asked for rain on Zion Cheshvan in Eretz Yisrael, Saint Halamat of the Bracha. So usually it starts raining around that time. So most of the rainwater from the winter has already fallen. So therefore, that's considered for Ilanos. That's considered to be their Rosh Hashana. That's considered to be Rov. Has the winter already passed? So therefore, you go after Aleph Shvat. Tanrabanan, according to Beis Hillel, it would be Tu B'Shvat. Tanrabanan, Ma'aser Rabbi Akiva Shaliket Esrog Be'echad B'Shvat. Rabbi Akiva, he picked an esrog, harvested it. He picked it out of the ground on the first day of Shvat. And Nagbo Shnei Yisurin. He took off two different Shumos and Maestros. He took off Shumos and Maestros for last year, 1/10 for last year. Or he took off the Meiser. Meiser Sheni for last year, and the Meiser Ani for the following year. The reason he did this is because to fit with both the Shita of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We'll see in a second. Because according to Beis Shammai, it was already the new year. Aleph Shvat was already the new year for the Esrog. So therefore, he took off Shumas, he took off Maisa. Let's say it was the second year going into the third year. So the start of the third year. So according to Beis Shammai, you have to take off Maisa Rishon, you have to take off Maisa Ani also. According to Beis Hillel, it's not until Tu B'Shvat, it's not considered the Rosh Hashana. So therefore, you would take off Maisa Rishon and Maisa Sheni. So he took off Maisa Sheni and Maisa Ani. Beis Hillel, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer Lo Minag Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Nagba El Minag Rabbi Gamliel Rabbi Lezer Nagba. The suffix of him wasn't revolving around Machlokis between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. It was a Machlokis between Rabbi Lezer and Gamliel. What's that Machlokis? It's not an Esrog Shavel Ilan Begimel Zrachin L'Yarek V'Derek Echad. An esrog is comparable to a tree in three ways, and to a vegetable in one way. Shavel Ilan Begimel Drachim L'Orlo L'Revayel L'Shvius. It's comparable to a tree in three ways. An esrog is somewhere between, I guess, a fruit tree and a vegetable, so it's a suffix what it is. So most people hold it similar to a fruit tree. So therefore, even Rabbi Gamliel, who holds it similar to a vegetable, in three ways it's similar to an Elon. For example, for Orla, the cutoff date again for Orla is going to be Tu B'Shvat, U'Ravai, also Tu B'Shvat, U'Shvius, also Tu B'Shvat, U'Yarek B'Derech Echad, Shebeshas Likitaso Isura. There's actually two things that are different about if you differentiate between a tree and a vegetable. One is the actual date where the new year starts, which is either for a tree is Tu B'Shvat according to Beis Hillel, according to Beis Shammai it's Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and also it depends. The difference between a vegetable and a fruit is when you start calculating it. Is it you go after the emergence of the fruit, or do you go after the time that it was picked? For a vegetable, you go after the time it was picked. From the fruit, you go after the time that it emerged. So the Gemara at this point, we're going to see later, is really referring to both things, these categorizations. But at this point, the Gemara is really assuming Arlo Royal Shvius, in terms of it goes the year calculated after the emergence of the esrog. It's similar to a vegetable in terms of the chumas and maestros. You take off after when it's harvested, not when it emerges on the tree. He says it's similar to a tree for everything. It's always all these halachas, even Shumas and Maestros, go after the emergence. So that was the Gemara says that was Rabbi Yossi said that was why Rabbi Akiva took off Shumas and Maestros 2 times, because he wasn't sure whether the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Lezer. According to Rabbi Gamliel, an esrog is treated like a vegetable, and therefore you go after Shas Lakita. And according to Rebbe Lezer, it's similar to a tree, a fruit tree, and you go after the Chanata. So the Chanata happened, the emergence of the esrog on the tree happened before Aleph Shvat, and it was plucked on Aleph Shvat. So Rosh Chodesh Shvat has already come. So therefore, according to Rebbe Gamliel, it was the third year. And according to Belezer, it says it's like a tree. It goes after the emergence, so then it was already the second year. So therefore, he took off Meiser Ani and Meiser Sheni. So Gemara says, "Mi avdina ketrei chumri." Do we paskin? How could Rabbi Akiva do like two chumras? Vatani laolam halacha di Rabbi Hillel. Really, the halacha follows Beis Hillel. Rotel asik di Rabbi Shammai osa. Kedivrei Beis Hillel osa. If you want to do practically whatever you choose to do, you either do like Beis Shammai, you can do like Beis Hillel. So my level Ion Ben Sion now. Ion Ben Sion. The question Mepharshim ask on this brisa is that the olam halacha di Rabbi Hillel. The halacha follows Beis Hillel. You can choose whichever one you want. So what's the point of telling me the halacha is Beis Hillel? If the halacha is Beis Hillel, then I can't do like Beis Shammai. It must be my rotel ask Rabbi Shammai osa k'divrei Beis Hillel osa. The difference is that halacha, sometimes when the Brisa instructs you that the halacha follows a certain shita, that's if you have no idea, you're an Amar, so you have no affiliation with the Torah, you ask a rabbi what the halacha is. He says, follow halacha like Beis Hillel, we pass like Beis Hillel. But if you're someone who has delved into the sugya a little bit, you looked into it a little bit, and you see maybe it's more Mustabar or Beis Shammai shita over here than Beis Hillel. That's the Gemara saying. That's the second line of the Brisa. Harod said that if you have an inkling, you don't have to have 100% validation, 100% proof. But if you learn the Gemara, learn the shitas, and you have a little background in Torah, and you decide it makes more sense Beis Shammai to me, you could choose to follow Beis Shammai. I think that's the answer to that question. There's different answers. The Gemara itself asks this question in Eruvin. Gemara says it depends. It talks about it being a baskol. There was a baskol. The first answer the Gemara says, baskol said Allah was like Beis Hillel. That was the first. And the second one was, depends what time it was. Nowadays we pass on Beis Hillel. Before it could have been Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. I want to say what my explanation fits into the first answer of the Gemara in Eruvin, where the Gemara Eruvin says that when Brisa says the halacha follows Beis Hillel, that's a baskol. Baskol, we don't follow baskol halacha really. A baskol is a girl's voice from heaven. I don't know exactly what that means. Anyway, it's basically for weak people that have no understanding of the Gemara. They're weak in terms of the Torah. And they go to a rabbi, they ask. That's what the baskol signifies. You paskin like Beis Hillel. The rabbi tells you to paskin like Beis Hillel. For people that are stronger, that are men of the Torah. They've had milchem shel Torah. They take their Gemaras, they hit each other over the head with them. Those people, they take those big art scrolls, they buy the big art scrolls, not the Daf Yomi edition, the full version, and they whack each other on the head with them. Just they want the bigger Gemaras that can whack each other on the head with them. I'm joking. If you if you don't know the halacha, you go like Beis Hillel. If you have an inkling, the halacha might be like you're allowed to. The Torah allows you to follow Beis Shammai. The Brisa continues. Mikula Beis Shammai, Mikula Beis Hillel, Rosh. If you have no knowledge, and you just say, okay, whatever Beis Shammai says goes the kula, I'm gonna follow Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says the kula, I'm gonna go like Beis Hillel. You have no idea about the Torah. If you can prove it that when Beis Shammai is making halachas like them, and when Beis Hillel is making halacha like him, like I said before, you have an inkling, you know what the Torah is talking about. You have a reason to base your psak on that, so then you could do that. We're talking about over here where he has no idea. You consider Russia. Again, this person, he doesn't know anything about the Torah. He's just taking chumras upon himself. The fool walks in darkness. When you take too many chumras upon yourself, it's like you're walking in darkness because you're going to fall. You can't live a life of total abstinence, of total isser. If you're someone who doesn't know and you want to just paskin like one of them, then you can paskin like Beis Hillel, like their kulas and their chumras, or like Beis Shammai, their kulas and their chumras. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, how could Rabbi Akiva be machmir for two chumras? Rosh says Rabbi Akiva Gemore istapikle. He wasn't sure what he heard. He didn't know if Beis Hillel really said Tu B'Shvat. They said Aleph B'Shvat. Since he wasn't sure, he really held like Beis Hillel. He held like Beis Hillel. Again, he was someone who didn't want to be somech on his own. Again, even Rabbi Akiva obviously was someone who knew the Torah, but again, if you're too afraid to be somech on your own opinion, that would fall back into the category of asking a Rav, right? You ask a Rav. If you're confident enough to paskin yourself, then you're allowed to do that. But if Rabbi Akiva, he relied on his Rebbeim, right? The Gemara has Rabbi Lezer also. He didn't say something except as what his Rebbeim said. Even if you're a big Talmud Chacham, right, it's possible that you can just ask a Rebbe. You can get off easy. Don't make decisions yourself. The Torah allows you to do that. Eventually, you have to make decisions yourself. He wasn't sure what he held like Beis Hillel. He didn't know whether it was whether they said first of Shvat or they said Tu B'Shvat. So therefore, when it was Aleph Shvat, he didn't know if it was really if it was Aleph Shvat. So then it was the right Rosh Hashana. If it wasn't, if it was Tu B'Shvat, then it wasn't the Rosh Hashana. So you have to give Meiser Sheni. If it was Rosh Hashana already, you have to give Meiser Ani for the Ilanos. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Omer Lo Mina Beisham Beis Hillel Nagba Ela Minag Rabbi Gamliel Lezer Nagba. His suffix, again, like we said before, was based on whether he passed like Rabbi Gamliel or Lezer. Be'echa B'Shvat K'Beis Shammai Nagba. So the Gemara asks, why was he knowing to do it like Beis Shammai? He basically would tell Amar Chanina, Rabbi Tema, Rabbi Chanina, Chananya Hachab Esrog Shachantu Peros of Kodem Tedvav, the Idach Shvat Askina. Really, we're talking about they emerged, the fruit, the Esrog emerged before last Tu B'Shvat. Uvedinu, so therefore, really you should do Uvedinu Afilu Kodem Lachein. And therefore, even if it was before Rosh Chodesh Shvat, he would have done it. Really didn't hold like Beis Shammai, he held like Beis Hillel. And the cutoff point is Tu B'Shvat. Except for the fact that it was last year's fruit. So it was last year, it emerged before last year, so therefore he took off Meiser Sheni for last year, and he took off Meiser Ani for this year. And it doesn't have to be that the occurrence happened on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Afilu Kodem Lachein. Ma'aseh Kachaya. That just happened to be the day that it fell out. Ravina Mar Krok V'Tani Lo Echa B'Shvat Haya Ela Tu B'Shvat Haya. V'Lo Minag Beis Shammai V'Yisrael Nagba Ela Minag Rabbi Gamliel Lezer Nagba. He changes two things over. He says it was Machlokes Lezer and Gamliel, and also it wasn't exactly what happened on Shvat. On Rosh Chodesh Shvat, it happened on Tu B'Shvat. So really, he passed like Beis Hillel. And it was Tu B'Shvat, so therefore Tu B'Shvat is the cutoff point. But the question is, do you follow Rabbi Gamliel? Rabbi Gamliel says you treat it like a Yarek, so therefore you go after Lakita. And Lakita is, it was on Tu B'Shvat, or do you follow Chanata, which is before Tu B'Shvat, so therefore he wasn't sure. Lezer or Rabbi Gamliel, what's the halacha? Amar Rav Bar Huna Hashana Amar Rabbi Gamliel Esrog Achal Lakita Isuro. Now that Gamliel says in Esrog we treat it like a Yarek in terms of Trumas and Meiser to go after when it was plucked from the ground, Rosh Hashana Shalo Tishrei. Second halacha is that the Rosh Hashana for it, since it's like a vegetable, it's fully fledged like a fully fledged. It's full fledged like a vegetable, and therefore a tree is Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashana. The Rosh Hashana for Yerakos is the Rosh Hashana is to Aleph Tishrei. So then where it says Meisive Roshim Elazar Omer Likit Esrog Erev Tu B'Shvat Ad Shelo Tovo Hashemesh. The Brisa says he picked an Esrog Erev Tu B'Shvat, right before it turned Tu B'Shvat, before Shkia on Tu B'Shvat. Ad Shelo Tovo Hashemesh. Achazar V'Likit Mish Tovo Hashemesh. Then he took another Esrog after Shkia. Ein Torman U'Maishim Nizel Zel Lefish Ein Torman U'Maishim Lo Min Achadash Al Yashan. You don't take off Shumas and Maestros from the Chadash and Yashan. You see, the cutoff point is Tu B'Shvat, and this was Gamliel. Shlishis Nechnes LaRaviyah. Shlishis Maaser Rishon Meiser Ani. Raviyah is Meiser Rishon Meiser Sheni. Therefore, since it's 2 years produce, therefore you take off Meiser the third year going to the fourth year. So for the third year you take off Meiser Ani. and the fourth year you take off Meiser Sheni. So let's continue on your Dalam and Aleph, on your Ted Vavam and Aleph. Man, Shammos the Azal Basal Lakita. Who is the Tan of this Brisa? Then Sarah Gamliel. Who is the Tan of this Brisa? Gamliel. He says you go after Lakita when you pluck it from the ground. It can't be Rabbi Lezer. Lezer says you go after Chanata, after emergence of Katani Shvat, and the Brisa is centered around that it being Tu B'Shvat. It should be according to Gamliel. It should be the cutoff point should be Tishrei, Aleph Tishrei, just we said. So the Gemara reverses. Eli Itmar Haki Itmar. Amar Rabba Rabhuna Amar Afagav Amar Gamliel Esra Gavak Lakita V'Yerek Rajana Shvat. Says we go back on what he said that really Rabbi Gamliel only said it in one vein, in terms of an esrog is like a vegetable in terms of you convey it, you establish its trumas and maestros based on when it's plucked. But the Rosh Hashana is still Tu B'Shvat, like a tree. So it depends whether it's plucked before Tu B'Shvat or after Tu B'Shvat. That's the conclusion of today's daf. It's been sponsored by Caleb Humphrey. Anyway, have a good night. Bye.